Hi, and welcome to the Rejuvenation and Resilience Series Part 3. This is a Wellness Wednesday. I'm Tara Adams, your Wellness Manager. I hope you're well today. We have joining us today Georgia Balsevich from the Hotchkiss Brain Institute. Georgia has a PhD in neurobiology and is going to chat with us today about the relationship between stress and eating, something I am very interested about. So welcome, Georgia.
Thank you.
Let's start off with all of your rich expertise. Can you give us some of the science behind what is stress anyway?
Yeah, for sure. That's a good question because I'm sure we've all said that we're stressed at times, and we've definitely all, I'm sure, experienced stress, but what actually is stress? Well, I think it's quite interesting because stress can come in all different forms. So probably the stress we're most familiar with is either work stress or some sort of financial stress. But there's also stress that comes in more of a physical form, and this can be from injury or from sickness. But what's really cool is despite the very broad type of stressor that we experience, it actually all activates the same system in our body. And so we can have this stress that can be almost imagined or perceived, but so long as we perceive that as a threat to our body, then we will mount this very regular stress response. And this stress response originates in our brain, and it basically activates a downstream system that leads to the release of stress hormones, which are known as cortisol. And then cortisol can act across multiple tissues in our body in order to try and manage or handle that stress.
Wow. Okay. So stress is very real in our brains and our bodies. And interestingly enough, the stress can be very real or even imagined, and we still feel the effects.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, great. Um, how about, can you tell us a bit about how does stress correlate or affect our weight and what we choose to eat?
Yeah. So there's actually a biological basis that connects stress experience or stress exposure with our changes in body weight or perhaps our eating habits. And it actually stems from pretty far back in our history, and it's very evolutionary conserved. So if you think about the situation of a caveman and some sort of enemy, it could be well, whatever, any sort of large animal that it's trying to escape.
Let's say
And
tiger. A tiger's
yeah, for
coming. Okay.
example. Um, and for example, when you have such an experience, you do need a very high level of alertness, but you also need extra energy. And this is to, supply to our muscles so that we can actually flee the situation, and also for our brains in order to have that high alertness. And this is, so ultimately cortisol is able to mediate this effect. And so what cortisol does in our bodies is it can actually increase glucose production so that we have higher energy supplies to manage a stressor. And it will also increase food intake, again, so that it's a response so that we'll have more energy coming in order to handle this stress.
Okay, so if I'm imagining millions of years ago, there's a stressful situation. I think a tiger coming into the cave would be very stressful, but that episode ends however it's going to end. And then there's a recovery period, whereas today, many of us, I'm sure in the academic world, in the corporate world, you just kind of feel the stress almost all the time. So it's
Right.
quite different.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's interesting is so the stress response is been conserved over time, and yet now the forms of the stress really change. And if we have a work stress or if we have a financial stress, we may not actually need this increased energy, but it's still inherent in us because of how it was so many years ago.
And then that's the correlation between the glucose and the weight and the appetite and all that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, so when we are stressed, how does our brain impact the choices about what we want to eat? So why do we choose these comfort foods when we're stressed?
Yeah, yeah. Again, there's actually a biological basis for it. It's really interesting, and it's not that you're alone in that. In fact, I think it's 80% of individuals do change their eating habits when they're feeling stressed. Not all individuals will increase their food intake. There's actually approximately 30% of the population who will decrease their food intake when they're confronted with stress. But no matter what the overall effect is on food intake, so whether you increase or decrease your food intake in response to stress, there is a shift towards eating comfort foods, what we're saying. So comfort foods are really pleasurable foods. They have often like a high caloric density, so they're high in fat, basically, and high in sugars. And we perceive them as very pleasurable. And the reason we do this, actually, or it's hypothesized at least, is it's a form of self-medication. So obviously stress has a lot of negative effects. You have this negative emotional state. Well, by eating something that you find highly pleasurable, it's actually opposing these negative emotions. And so therefore it is a type of self-medication when you're feeling stressed to grab that chocolate bar or whatever your pleasure food is, and it will actually buffer, dampen what you experience. So the negative emotions you experience from stress.
That's all making perfect sense to me. And I'm sure everybody listening can relate to that moment. So, just for fun, Georgia, what would you say your comfort food is?
Yeah, so I definitely would grab the sweets for sure, more so than the salties. So I like anything creamy, like ice cream. Yeah, sometimes chocolate, but definitely I'd go for the ice cream probably first thing.
I think I'm very inclusive when it comes to my comfort foods. I like the sweet, the salty, the ice cream, the chocolate, the chips, the cookies, all of it. I think my only safety is just to not have it in the house because, yeah, when I'm feeling stressed, whether I'm aware of it or not, that's when I start hunting through the cupboards and
Yeah,
the secret places where you hide the goodies from the kids and stuff like
right.
that.
Yeah.
Um, can you tell me a little bit more about, the stress and the comfort food? So the short term versus the long term effects of eating these delicious comfort foods.
Right. So yeah, I basically just told you grab the comfort foods. It's gonna help with your mental health. Well, unfortunately, it's not quite that simple, as nothing ever is. So in the short term, if you feel stressed, so if your boss just told you you had a deadline that you were unaware of, grabbing that chocolate may help you feel better. So it's going to, like I said, be a very pleasurable feeling, and it's going to oppose the negative effects of that stress. Unfortunately, if you eat kind of comfort foods in the form of Western diet, basically, for a long term or like a long period of time, it's not going to help you deal with stress, and it's not going to be good for your mental health. So there's actually both animal and human studies showing that if you do have this chronic intake of Western diet foods, that there's actually a higher risk for developing stress-related mood disorders such as anxiety and depression. So whereby it may be beneficial in the short term to buffer that immediate effect of a stressor, it's not going to help you handle stress if you continue to eat this long term. And actually, in the opposite way, a healthy diet such as the Mediterranean diet has been shown to be protective against some of these stress-related mood disorders. So in general, it still is recommended that we choose a healthy diet and not these comfort foods. It's just that the short term, that immediate fix may actually be beneficial in dealing with that kind of acute stressor.
So we should still follow the doctor's orders, the Canada Food Guide, do our best to choose those healthy foods. However, under times of great stress, maybe be kind to yourself and enjoy a chocolate bar just
Right.
once in a while.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so George is giving us permission to once in a while have a chocolate bar, but also try to eat healthy the rest of the time. Um, this is great information for all of us. Our series is focusing on rejuvenation and resilience. So, can you help us tie in, how we manage stress and eating, and how does eating and stress, how's that all connected to resilience?
Right. So, obviously, everyone responds differently to stress. As I tried to emphasize in my first kind of question there, two individuals may encounter the same stressor, and one person may be stressed by that experience and the other one may not be. And so obviously there's this difference in stress, and one can be more resilient or vulnerable to stress. Now, one aspect is, of course, like a hereditary genetic factor, and this will really dictate whether or not you are perhaps more vulnerable to certain stressful situations or not. But really, we can't control this. This is passed down from our parents, and we can't really control our genes. But another big predictor of how we handle stress is environmental factors or lifestyle factors, really. And this we can control. And there's a lot of different factors that can affect how we deal with stress and how we handle it. One of them being diet. So I mentioned that in general, it's healthy. It's best for our mental health actually to have a balanced, healthy diet, but everything in moderation, right? So if you do have that stress, that acute stress or something, then maybe it's the best thing for you just to grab that chocolate bar if it's going to make you feel better. But other things may also really yeah, contribute to our resilience to stress. And these things can be, for example, I think you've already talked about meditation or sleep. These, of course, like if you get more sleep, you may have a better time handling what life throws at you, for example. Exercise is another one. These factors, these environmental or lifestyle factors, will have a big impact. They can actually interact with our genes. And so certain environmental factors may work better for certain individuals. And so it's really up to that person to figure out what works well for them and how they can, try and manage that stress.
And I like a lot of the things you're saying there because we often talk about the controllable versus the uncontrollable factors in your life, like your, gender, ethnicity, race, age, things like that. We can't control it. So embrace it, move on, and
Yeah,
then really invest your time and energy into those controllable lifestyle and environmental factors like your food choices and your activity levels and your sleep health and maybe starting a meditation practice, all those things. There's so many different pieces for all of us to try to navigate.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us the truth in your professional, academic, scientific opinion. Does eating comfort food help us or hurt us when we're stressed?
Yeah, so in the short term, I think it helps us for sure. So I'm not a dietitian, so I can't say what or what not to eat exactly, but research shows that it definitely, if you have that immediate stress, then grab that comfort food, whatever you find pleasurable, and indulge. Not long term though.
So maybe eat healthy as much as you can, and then you might not feel quite so guilty when you have those delicious chips or cookies or whatever. And
Exactly.
one of the things, you and I have been joking as we get together to prepare our talk today that, people always think that I'm the food police and I'm walking around judging what they eat. And I try to laugh and I try to say, if you're getting that delicious hot plate of French fries, the absolute thing you need to do is enjoy it.
Yeah,
Don't feel guilty when you're having that comfort food. Really savor it and enjoy it.
exactly, because otherwise that will offset the effects, the the pleasant effects. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
all.
yeah. I'll try not to walk by next time you grab a chocolate bar. Just enjoy it. Um, and that leads me to something else that I was thinking about based on our conversations is really all of us need to support each other to make those healthy choices as much as we can. And
Mhm.
then during those times of stress, to really be kind to each other. And there is no judgment. And, we're all grown ups and each of us has our own lives, and you never know what's going on in someone else's life. So,
Exactly. Yeah,
maybe they're eating salads and vegetables all day, every day, and today's the one day they're going to have two chocolate bars. Who knows?
exactly.
Wow. Well, it's such an interesting point of view to come from the neurobiology side of things, and we love doing work with the Hotchkiss Brain Institute. So I really appreciate all the work you did to get ready for today. I know that you prepared some really great slides that cover off what you were talking about, and we will be sure to share those slides along with the recording of our chat today. So thank
Great.
you for all your work, Georgia.
Well, thank you for having me. Really, it's been my pleasure.
Great, and hopefully you can come to ATV and meet some of our team members one day.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, this has been a great conversation, and as I mentioned, you can check out the slides to go along with the chat in the wellness community. And please do stay tuned for the remainder of the Rejuvenation and Resilience series. This is part 3, and we've got 5 more exciting conversations coming up. Until then, be kind to yourself, eat healthy, and every once in a while, enjoy that comfort food.